and welcome to today's session of Remembering John Perakos. I have with us today Dr. Ken Goldberg, Director of the Core Energetics Institute Northwest, International Trainer and Long-Term Consultant Director, if you like, to the other institutes. Ken, thanks so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm doing well. Nice to see you, Ranil.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. Hey, appreciate you taking the time, mate.
Sure, of
100
course.
years. Yeah, John, 100 years had he been around. How amazing, hey?
Yeah.
So fill me in. How did you meet John? How did you get into this work, Ken?
Well, I was very fortunate. While I was in medical school, I met the Pathwork community there in Michigan. And
Yeah.
most all of the people in the Pathwork there were core energetics people. They had done bioenergetic training and they had worked with John. And so I went to some, a bunch of Pathwork things. And as I was leaving medical school, I was looking for opportunities to do some training in some sort of growth work. And
Right.
I sort of wrote to all the people that I'd been interested in and exposed to. And John actually called me back. He called
Wow.
back and said, "Hey, I hear that you're interested. Why don't you talk to one of a doctor who's been in the training?" And that was a really nice personal touch.
Yeah.
And it turned out there was a training starting soon in California. And after giving it a lot of consideration, I thought, why not? I know I love this work. It's got to be a good thing. And he was, one of the main trainers. He was there each of the 5-day segments. He was there 3 days. So
Wow.
for the 4 years, 3 days of John, 2 days of somebody else, 3 days of John, 2 days of somebody else. And I loved it. I was great exposure. I went to some workshops with him as well,
Yes.
and then assisted. And after the training, I stayed on and assisted, and worked more with John and the rest of the gang, and went to Tremurti a couple times and assisted him there, and was able to see him kind of in his element. And yeah, that's how I met him.
Fantastic. So when you first met him, I mean, what was it that's the most memorable for you from back then?
Wow. Well, I think was the fact that he could see people in a way and understand and know things to say and what to do that seemed like magic to me. I mean, he
Yeah.
understood people just by seeing their body and
Yeah.
how they moved. And I was like, that's a level of technology I had no comprehension of. It was amazing. And as I began to understand how it worked, oh, that's what he's doing. He's just reading them. He can make inferences about them from their energy and from their body. It was amazing. Yep, that's what stood out.
That's been the thing over the years, hasn't it? How under the magic, there's usually a science and intuition. And what I'm hearing is, I guess, what we saw later on was how he synthesized that and made it look so natural, and
Yep.
really
Yeah.
saw the person in amongst all of that information.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other thing was that even as, he softened over the years, but in the beginning, as confrontational as he was, and as
Yeah.
much as he was kind of in people's faces, he also clearly loved them. He was
Yeah.
generous and caring and willing to say, "Oh, I'm sorry if I offended you. I'm sorry I hurt you. If I made a mistake, how can we repair it?" In ways that also really helped me appreciate him. And that was the other thing, that as much as he was really skilled and could see people, he also really cared and
Wow.
loved people and loved his work. Yeah.
Yeah, tremendous. And for you then, as you embarked on this journey, I mean, you came out of medical school, like most graduates, I guess we're all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and wanting to charge into the world. And you've got a lot of that get up and go energy. From your own personal journey, what stood out the most in terms of your interaction with John?
Wow. Well, certainly for me, an ongoing support. I would even call it positive transference. Because I was a medical doctor, he
Yeah.
was really looking for other medical doctors he could relate to and support. And I was the beneficiary of that. That really stood out, that, as much as I worked hard and was a good student and all, I also felt his support and love and encouragement in ways that I don't know that I'd I guess I'd had versions of that early in life, but never in such a deep and meaningful way. That really stood out for me.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's pretty hard for any of us in our families to get that sort of support, isn't it? And that sort of
Yeah.
insight into ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. To feel seen and known and supported for all of who I was. That was a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you evolved this relationship with John, as in the early days, many of you did. But I mean, you had another dimension because you also had this professional background. I mean, how did that work for you, these multi-leveled and multi-layered relationships?
Well, uh, at the time, it seemed completely natural that, because I think the Pathwork and core grows out of the spiritual community growth work model, it never seemed like dual relationships were a thing. But, after the trainings, I would, because when I was assisting, especially, but
Yeah,
even during the training, if somebody needed to pick John up at the airport, Sigmar would sometimes say, "Hey, Ken, can you pick John up?" Of
yeah,
course, I'd love to. And we'd, drive up to Mendocino where the training was and have dinner
right.
on the way.
Hang out a
And
bit.
um, and we got to know each other, and chat about not just the training, but about the work in general and about how science and, spirituality fit together and where the
Yeah,
overlap was. And yeah,
yeah,
so
yeah,
it never felt like, of course, now looking back on it, I can say, yeah, there were some, not everyone can handle multiple relationships like that with their trainer.
for
He
sure.
was never my primary therapist, though I obviously did sessions with him in the trainings and a few separate,
Yeah,
other times.
yeah.
But it felt pretty natural at the time.
Wonderful. So from that peripheral time, if you like, all that time outside of the professional, um,
Mhm.
what's memorable for you about John the man? Not John the scientist, not John the researcher, not John the therapist and the MD, but John the man.
I loved his boyish glee at discovery and seeing places and eating good food. And, uh, he would love little things, a nice meal or,
Yeah,
sorbet after the meal. And just, for a guy who had all this uh, seriousness and all this transfer on him. It was just nice to see him be playful and light and talk about life and just be more, I could just imagine John the boy in there. He was still present. It was lovely.
great.
Yeah.
And still allowed himself to have some fun, particularly with this broader community.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic. So as you know, what I found fascinating, and I met John late on, was that he was still curious and he still was interested in research going on everywhere, and however much he could contribute to that, he was just like, okay, how do we keep evolving, keep developing, keep learning? Um, with that sort of man, and given that the history that the group of you that were around him had in such diverse backgrounds in healing and medicine and therapy, how did you find the contributions that you guys could bring to John and his work? How did he interact with that?
Boy, he was very supportive and open to people bringing contributions. I never felt like I could contribute in the ways that were really needed. I mean, I don't have the other part of my training in
Right.
preventive medicine was partly about research and public health and, health policy stuff.
Yeah.
And I just didn't have the patience and the temperament to be doing grants and setting up research projects. So in
Yeah.
that way, I feel a little bit, that I let him down, because that is something that of course we need.
Yeah.
Without some kind of research
Mm.
and so on, then so often the ideas don't keep moving and they lose traction. And at least I think uh, the work that I'm doing is pushing synthesizing some of the newer science
Yeah.
um, in a positive direction. And I have a manuscript that hopefully will get published, and then it will be, that will be a contribution. But it's not quite
Fantastic.
the same as the original research that John would have loved and that I would have loved to have had the temperament for.
But I guess what you're describing is that critical last part of the core process, isn't it? The life path and how it unfolds, professionally, personally, spiritually, and the rest, isn't it? So perhaps, I mean, you're at that stage of being able to bring that component as a contribution for us all around now. And speaking to some of your old colleagues from back then, they've been doing it on and off and in the flow of their own life force, I guess, and in the river, so to speak.
It's true. It's true. I don't regret that wasn't my life path. It just paths not taken.
Yeah, no, I get it. And given how busy you are, I mean, do you get much of a chance to connect with your colleagues and from your peers from back then?
Well, I'm fortunate in that in the last 10 years or so, there's been a resurgence of connection between the core directors and other core folks around the globe. Some of whom I hadn't met before, but some of whom I had. And, being involved with the now growing directors community and trying to help develop standards and curriculum that's international has been a wonderful opportunity to both connect with old colleagues, meet new friends, and I guess that's been the contribution too. That has felt really more natural for me, is to be part of that movement. It's also happened at the time when, after a dozen years, now there've been conventions. We missed the last year because of COVID. It'll happen next year, hopefully. But the conventions have been a great opportunity to see, oh, right, this movement's still growing and flourishing, and there's people all over the globe, and to connect with old friends and to meet new ones.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. And yes, look, that's so interesting, isn't it? Now there's as the knowledge pool seems to be spreading more, as people are embracing, I guess, this digital age that we're on. It's filtered through to our community, and this is one of the inspirations for this particular initiative, because I'm so keen to capture, the personal experiences of you guys that were around. I mean, we got John pretty late. Many of the people in the community these days, they only know of him through the rest of us, and or more normally for us in the outer regions, just through the individuals. It's wonderful to hear from some of you guys that had some quality time with him.
Yep. Yeah, I feel really fortunate to have had as much time with him. And of course, the other people around him, the original New York faculty and the other international faculty that most of whom have retired or moved on. It was a wonderful thing to have the exposure. I mean, it was not necessarily the easiest group of people to get along with. There were some strong egos and some strong, opinions, but they were interesting characters for sure.
Yeah. Well, I was interested in that because particularly in the early stages, when there's a lot of pioneering to be done, you tend to get those strong personalities with the strong character and the wills. I mean, how did John manage with, I'm sure there'd be more than a few of them in the room together.
Yeah. Well, I think the fact that after he died, things really fell apart says something, right? That he was able to hold them together, and with his vision and his will and his love for the work, was able to manage these really disparate personalities, some of whom were really lone wolves and others were really community seekers. And there was just a range of personalities. And, he really clearly was holding the reins loosely enough to let people do their thing, but enough to keep things moving ahead. And after he was gone, it wasn't really possible for them. They were really at each other, which it's sad, but understandable, right? Because they really were the kind of individualistic people who loved learning and had their own styles. And that happens in the beginning.
Yeah, for sure. And, John was saying this about his colleagues in studying with Reich as well, that there was this, exactly what you described, this intensity, this curiosity, this power, this competition. And so the tremendous bodies of work have come out in the Neo-Reichian fields as a result of this sort of energy, hasn't it?
Yeah. Right. And John was really at the heart of that. I didn't really get to know Al I met
Yeah.
him once, but with his relationship with Al must have been really, pretty dynamic. And but seeing what the early days of CORE and the New Age Center were, there was some of that dynamism, which is great, but it's hard to keep it all in an orbit.
It's like a genie in a bottle, isn't it? It's great when it comes out, and then, oh my gosh, what do you do with it now?
Yep. Yeah.
Thank you, Ken. I really appreciate your time and sharing some of these thoughts. And I'm going to be coming back because there's going to be a few more questions. But for now, I really appreciate you taking your time out for today.
I'm glad to be here and to contribute, and hope that in honoring John and his work, that I'm giving back some of what I got, because I certainly was given a lot by him and by this work. It's been a real gift in my life.
Yeah, and I must say, when I talk with many of your colleagues and peers, they're certainly reflective of what you do put in to the community and the body of work, and your personal commitment into the work in your own unique way, because obviously you've got a different view compared to some of your peers, and that's constantly reflected back to me. So I appreciate your efforts for the rest of us.
Thanks. It's nice to hear that.
Yeah. And thank you for taking it in. I can feel that, and I really appreciate that. It's tough when, especially some of you guys have been around a long time and you're holding such a big space, and to let some of the love in, as we saw with Karen recently. It's wonderful. Thank you, Ken.
Yeah. What a wonderful gift this work has been to increase all of our capacity to love and heal and share.
Yeah.
So thanks for doing this, Renil.
Oh, you're welcome. And just as you were saying that, I was remembering John standing there telling me, and he goes, this conversation, and he just looked at me and he pointed the finger and he goes, "You just need to love." Okay, John.
That sounds
I can see
like
the
John.
little shaky but firm finger. You just need to love. But I also could appreciate that he was being very gentle with me. Well, from what I've heard from many of you, in the old days, it might have been a poke in the chest with a little bit more.
Yeah, or even a fist to the chest. I got one of those once. Yeah, that was interesting.
Oh, wonderful. Ken, thanks so much again, mate. Have a great day, and we'll catch up soon.
You too. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.